A question you will get in an interview often, especially if you're interviewing as a product manager, is how do you deal with customer feedback that is challenging or difficult to the product or service that you've built or something that you as a company are trying to sell? Welcome back to Interview Out, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. It does not matter the role, it does not matter the company, it does not matter the position. If you use the principles that we talk about and teach in this channel, you will show up better in your interview and you will land your dream job. So if you're a product manager or you find that you have a tough time giving answers in interviews that talk about customer obsession, I would really love it if you just type product manager or customer obsession as a comment below. It helps with the algorithm, kind of tricks Google into thinking that there's a lot of stuff going on. But honestly, I want to hear from you. I want to understand who's watching these videos. It seems like my product manager questions get a lot of playback, so I would love to hear from the product managers among us. This week's candidate is a product manager targeting a general tech company. They weren't actually targeting FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, I guess now we'll call them Meta, Amazon, Google, etc. But just a general tech company. They were worried about sharpening up their skills, and they're targeting a product manager role. And for this interview, we are targeting customer obsession as the leadership principle. And the question that we asked was, tell me about a time where you had difficult customer feedback to change a product or innovate. As per usual with these videos, what we'll do is we'll play back the mock interview as it happened, and I will jump in with commentary along the way.
When you're in a product manager role, and sometimes in a TPM role, there's more product manager question. There's going to be instances where you get, let's call it not nice feedback from a customer, difficult feedback from a customer. And they're asking for an improvement to a process, product, whatever, to kind of, make the product better for them. I'd like to hear about a time where you had to receive difficult or direct feedback from a customer to make something better for them. Well, let's just start with, what was the feedback and what course of action did you take?
Yeah, so I remember when I was the product architect for the player, we were onboarding a new customer, AMC, and they had just gone live, and they were kind of in a rush to get their their OTT service online. They play shows like The Walking Dead and Better Call Saul. Yep. And so we on the player team, we are basically the face that consumers see, and AMC noticed that they were having some pretty serious issues with us, and they had filed several kind of like blocking escalations with us for ads not playing through their Google Ads IMA, for Nielsen ratings and Nielsen information not being pinged back to Nielsen. So like different quartiles, different spots along the playback. So quartiles should be sent. Yep. Is the user pausing or playing the video, that kind of thing, and so those escalations came to me as the player architect, and I felt really bad, and I thought, I need to deliver what these guys have hired us to do as a company, and so I went downstairs and I talked to their client and integration engineer to kind of get his sense of what was going on. He was a little bit confused, but I got the contact information for the vice president over there at AMC and their director of engineering, and I set up a conference call with them to discuss these issues in greater detail. I had the tickets, but I kind of wanted to hear it from them. So we had this conference call. They explained that they were pretty upset, and I said, look, I'm going to take this over, and we're going to get to the bottom of these issues. And I said, look, these are not easy things, right? These are complicated issues that we're talking about here, and so I try to set expectations that we're going to keep giving them status updates as we work through these things, and they were fine with that. So it took, we took the escalations kind of one at a time. The first one was the Google ads. They weren't getting money attributed to them, and sometimes the ads weren't playing. The development team, these are experts at building video players and interacting with ad systems. They found a bug with the Google Ads API. It took us about a week to convince Google that there was a problem with their API, that there was a bug, and that it was affecting AMC, who was our mutual customer, right? So we have basically what I did is I called our partners in, Google and Nielsen, who we were both partners with, and got them on board with these problems. And I said, we need to resolve these. Worked with Google to resolve the ads issue, worked with Nielsen to uncover the strange encoding problem that we were having with AMC's content. So they were streaming their content over the internet, but the content had originally been playing on regular television. And there are different Nielsen cues that appear in television versus online content. And the transcoding or the encoding process wasn't converting those cues to the online streaming protocol type of cue. So we got to the bottom of that. And this took a couple of weeks, but we were able to resolve all of the issues ultimately, and we regained AMC's trust.
So in general, this is actually fairly good setup for a situation and task portion. Now he goes on to talk about kind of what they did. Doesn't really talk about the results other than we fixed it. But just from a situation and task point of view, it's clear what the problem is and who the customer is. And kind of what the impact sort of. He doesn't get into numbers, and that's a little bit of a nit here, which is, well, okay, they're not playing ads, but is this how big of an issue is this really? He didn't really contextualize that. Like as an interviewer, I'm going to make up numbers, and in some cases it might be a big number and favorable to him, but it might be I don't really know, and so I underestimate how big a deal this was, and so that's a case where you as the candidate can do a better job of contextualizing and painting that picture for me. But overall, this is a good setup, reasonable structure with a serious customer problem and a lot of ownership. The only real nit I have is that as a candidate, he progressed into his results, his action, and it was kind of a hand wavy, like we fixed it. And so it's, he talked a little bit about the encoding problems. Okay, but as someone who's objectively listening to this, who's looking at this person who's call it a L6, L7 product manager, right? So not quite VP level, but maybe just at the director level or just below that. That's kind of where he's targeting. It's a little too hand wavy for what they did. It's a little too hand wavy for the action portion. And I'd want to know that there's more depth of field here. And so it's a little bit of a challenge. Now, he does have the additional kind of complexity here of it's not just his company and their customer, but there's a third party, Google, and they're notoriously very easy to work with Google. They are so much customer support, so easy to work with, especially if you're at the enterprise level. So that is an added layer of complexity, which is awesome, but I still, too much hand waving. And so as a logical next question is if I'm interrogating this and doing this interview, that's kind of where my head is going, is I want to know, okay, but what did you actually do? So maybe let me just poke at the Google part of this and kind of see how you as a product manager then layer on the additional details.
Okay. Hold on, let me finish this note.
Okay. 4 minutes. Wonderful.
The issue with Google, I've worked with them before in the past. Help me understand how you said it took a week to get them to kind of take ownership that it was their bug. How did you convince them it was their bug?
That's a great question. We had tests, obviously, that we ran every day, every night, whenever we created a build, and I actually had to ask a developer to file a bug with Google, first of all, and figure out how to file a bug. We had to get a contact at Google that would return our calls. And then we did an online debug session with them to show them using their API.
Hold on 1 second. So I'm not going to say the name of the company you work for. I find it really hard to believe that the company you work for, you didn't have a Google contact. How did that come to pass?
Just so we're clear about, well, I was kind of a jerk about the way I asked this interjection question, so shame on me. But I'm jumping in and asking that question because the way that this candidate was representing themselves in terms of their level in the organization, and then this comes out. Right? He's worked at a pretty big company, pretty well-known company. The more senior you are, the more likely that you are dealing with escalations with third parties and partners. You should know who the contact or point of contact is at those companies. And if you don't, it's because you're a little bit further down in the organization, or you just have a really bad process at your company. But all of those are pretty telling, which is what I'm getting at with this question. And again, being reflective here and looking at it, I probably could ask the question a little bit nicer. But that was a kind of a giveaway and a tell. in the answer that I'm kind of poking out here and challenging what it is this candidate was saying.
You didn't know who at Google you could contact given who your company was and the product that you were working on.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I didn't have the Google contact. I didn't know who to contact. You know, the here's the answer, right? The answer is that Google is just one of many ad providers that we integrated into the player.
Fair
Okay,
enough.
we were not Google's customer. Google's customer was AMC. We were partnered with Google in the sense that Google makes their API freely available, and you can integrate it with whatever product you want to integrate it with. We were integrating it with our video player, and Google and like a lot of companies, they kind of unilaterally make changes to their APIs and products whenever it suits them.
Yes,
They'll give you
I have no idea what he's talking about. I've never had any interaction like that at all. Never, not once, never. Google's awesome. They don't do things like this.
they'll give you a notice. Hey, we're changing this thing, but you know, in Seattle didn't have the weight of, let's say, in Philadelphia. We weren't the headquarters office. We were kind of a small division of. Google didn't care. They didn't even know about us. So that's why I didn't have a contact.
Makes sense. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay.
So again, let me be clear. I didn't ask the question as a follow-up in the nicest possible way, and I recognize that. But the candidate did a great job of explaining the situation, right? When challenged, great answer. Google, not our customer. Google, not really even our partner. AMC, who's providing us content that they want put on our streaming platform, they are working with Google, and that's what broke. You know, we have the API that we can integrate with. Cool. He walked through it, explained it away, didn't get flustered, didn't push back. This was a really good response to, quite honestly, was kind of a jerkish question from the interviewer, me, but candidate did a great job.
It also makes sense that yes, fine. They make their API available to AMC. AMC is your customer, and therefore it's, yeah, got it. So the feedback that was surfaced to the team, it was largely through trouble tickets. Is that's what I heard you say?
From AMC, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when you think about the prioritization of all of their issues, right? It sounded like they had a handful of them. It sounds like you started with the Google one. What was the framework you guys used to kind of prioritize their list of bugs, which sounded like it was not short?
The framework that we use, so we use Jira, right, as our bug tracking system.
That's a track. I'm asking, how did you prioritize the things to get done?
Yeah, so the player we have a stand-up meeting every day where we talk about new and existing escalations that we're working on. When a blocking escalation is received, it goes to the top of the list, obviously. And we have an internal SLA where we want to turn around a fix or a new build for a blocking escalation within, let's say, 48 hours. And so when a blocking one appears, we actually have a couple of people. We have one person on the team that is devoted, basically an engineer that is devoted to looking at those kinds of escalations and digging into them to try to resolve them, because a player is a very complicated thing and it's easy to get wrong if you're using the player API or if you're using a system like Google. It's really easy to get those things wrong. So that he's an SRE, and so the SRE kind of goes through that bug very closely, trying to reproduce the problem that's been reported. Once he has exhausted his investigation and he validated that it's a real bug, then it comes to the team, and then the team kind of takes over and starts debugging through the code. And like I said, so we have an SLA that we follow and we try to get it fixed out as soon as possible. But that's the process.
All right. Well, okay. First, the candidate didn't really understand the question, right? And I even poked it first. He said, "Well, we have Jira. That's okay. That's not a prioritization framework. That's more of a tool that you can use for kind of stack ranking stuff." Sure, but when pressed and asked, "Well, how are you prioritizing the things that get done?" he kind of fell back to, "Well, we have an SLA," which, okay, that's a good guidepost, but it's not really a way of saying, well, we look at a few measures to understand where this falls in our priority queue, and based on what we have in front of, like, there was no discussion of a framework that would help me understand how this individual makes decisions about what work gets done versus, oh no, we've broken an SLA, panic, 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 like we got to stop all the work and do work on this thing. So that was a bit of a miss from this answer, which kind of left it a little bit flat. And again, you kind of get to the end of this, and from a star format point of view, I don't actually know what the result was. It sounds like they fixed it, but it's not entirely clear. And what did this mean in terms of metrics and revenue dollars, et cetera, to their customer, who is the content provider? There's a lot of kind of details missing here that massively would have improved upon this answer. So with this candidate, what do we have as far as the assessment that would have been read into the room had I been on the hiring loop? Well, for this, we have customer obsession. Candidate did a very good job of demonstrating a high degree of customer obsession. The issue as raised by the customer was a serious one, though candidate could have used data to set the context better. And parenthetically, more importantly, the issue was not with the player or code from candidate or his team. Candidate took on the investigative work of ultimately back solving into the bug being with a partner of the customer. In taking on the work to resolve the issue directly with Google, candidate and team did not simply hand the issue back to the customer, but rather took ownership, that's good, of the issue and delivered a satisfactory result, thus showing good customer obsession. So overall, I didn't ding the candidate too much here for not having specific results, because it was kind of, we talked around the answer and it was kind of with a third party and maybe the results weren't as forthcoming, and they had to, there's a lot of kind of hair on this from an answer point of view, and it's a weird situation, and I get it, having just spent a lot of time in the tech community and worked with many companies like Google where they've got these third-party APIs where sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But if you're kind of now working with a team that's a customer that's using this thing that maybe they don't understand that well, it can get really hairy really fast, and maybe you just don't have your own internal processes and metrics to measure success. It's more, is it working or is it not? And if it's working, great, nobody's crying. If it isn't, we have a problem, we need to fix it. Great. An enhancement to the answer would have been a nice context set of how much revenue did this really, or what did this mean to the customer, right? Having that lens versus, well, it tripped an SLA and therefore we have to go all hands on deck, versus, yeah, it turns out this company on this content that wasn't getting ads was, losing $50, $60, $100,000 a day. And I'm just made up a number, right? Versus, or $1 million a day, which is probably way too much. I don't know. I don't sell ads in the TV industry. But my point is that there was no context set, which makes it a little bit harder to understand. But that's a small nit in the whole of the answer here. Well, that's it for this week. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, go ahead and like this video. I would really appreciate it. It helps the algorithm. If you really loved it, go ahead and subscribe. This is the content that we're putting out every week to help you as a potential candidate looking for your dream job to learn how best to think about your answers that you're giving and get some, quite honestly, real interview, real feedback on how you can perform better trying to land your dream job.